Mr. President.
Marty, you're a little late, but go ahead.
I was standing, Mr. President.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've certainly debated this death penalty many times before. My position remains what it's always been. And I've heard debate on this floor many times over the death penalty. People have statistics that say, oh, it'll deter crime, it'll save lives. People have statistics that say, no, it doesn't deter crime, it doesn't affect murder rates. Other people will say, well, but it's a fundamental form of justice, an eye for an eye. And others say, no, that's not how we should do our penalties. For me, Mr. President, certain things in my mind are indisputable. That is, very, very wealthy people do not have the death penalty inflicted upon them. They hire teams of top lawyers and investigators, and they generally escape that penalty. It goes back to probably one of the most brutal calculating murders in U.S. history, Leopold and Loeb. They didn't get the chair. They didn't get the chair. Sacco and Vanzetti got the chair. The poor working class people got the chair. I once had a chance to look at a book that examined the death row log in New York State. And if you go back to the late part of the 19th century, most of the people executed had Irish names. And then there were Italian names. And then you started seeing Latino and names that appeared to be those of African Americans. What does that tell us? That one group or the other is more prone to crime? No. It tells you who was on the bottom of society at that period of time and for those decades. They got the chair. They weren't the only ones who committed the murders, but they got the chair. The death penalty has never, ever, as much as we've tried, as much as people build things into law about comparability and so on, the death penalty has simply never been evenly applied. Because frankly, Mr. President, in our criminal justice system, probably the best the world's come up with, there's still a flaw. It's a human system, created by humans, administered by humans, and it will make mistakes. And the problem with the death penalty is you can't go back and say, let's do it over. You can't let somebody out after you've executed them, when in fact, we know that many people, and as DNA evidence now makes it conclusive in many cases, many people who are innocent are convicted in our system based on all sorts of circumstantial evidence. The fact of the matter is, fundamentally, with our current technology and ability to secure the penal system, we don't need a death penalty to protect people. We can incarcerate people for life without parole. We can do it effectively. We can do it as safely as possible. And therefore, we ought not use this final, irreversible penalty because of what its use says about us, that we will deliberately take a life, albeit a life not well lived, albeit someone who has committed heinous crimes. We, the state of New York and its agents, should not be inflicting the death penalty. It is a penalty that's unworthy of a civilized society, as most advanced nations in the world have recognized. It's time for us to stop this political dance about let's have the death penalty. It's lost its political bite. I said on this floor many, many years ago when the death penalty was enormously popular and the polls showed everybody wanted it. I quoted someone talking to a clergyman about the death penalty. He said, well, you know, vox populi, vox deus. The voice of the people is the voice of God. They want the death penalty. And I said, does God change his mind every 20 years or so? Because the public does. The public now recognizes it just, I'm out there, no one in my district comes up to me anymore and says, what about the death penalty? It hasn't been used, you're going to restore it. No one asked the question. People have different concerns. Crime is down. No one in this state has been executed since 1965. Crime is down. If that doesn't prove anything, it proves we can deal with crime and reduce crime without using the death penalty. Mr. President, I'm against the death penalty. I urge my colleagues to oppose it. There is no reason we need this penalty. There's no reason it's fitting and appropriate, and it certainly is not worthy of our civilization. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Connor. President recognizes Senator Connor.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may make a statement under Rule 9, Section 4B. Mr. President, I want to call my colleagues' attention to an issue that's very, very important to my constituents and many constituents in New York City. Just this year, $8.24 billion was sent by the state, by this legislature passing the budget, to New York City's school system. That represents $643 million in additional dollars over last year. And last year, we gave them another $500 million in additional money. Yet, we hear in the city of New York, the mayor is cutting budgets in schools, cutting them severely. There's no excuse for this, Mr. President. There's no excuse in view of the money we sent. And he's saying it's our fault, the state's fault. What's the impact of this? In my district, in Lower Manhattan, the schools are bursting at the seams. After 9/11, I testified before a committee considering the rebuilding of Lower Manhattan. The mayor said the future of Lower Manhattan is residential. I testified, if you're going to do that, where are the schools, parks, playgrounds, and libraries? The school in Tribeca for Lower Manhattan is at 160% capacity. It's one of the best elementary schools in Manhattan. It's considered that. Yet condos are going up under the city's overdevelopment policies. Real estate people are saying, come here, we have the best school. They don't tell the people there's no room in the school for your child. Just this year, the assembly member there, Speaker Silver, and I were able to get a new school under construction on the west side of Lower Manhattan and a new school in Battery Park City, the first all-green school. We'll add 1,100 seats. Yet, that's not enough. Projections show the population booming down there. Parents are upset. They can't get their children into kindergarten. The mayor announced recently the highest birth rate in America is in Tribeca. Yet, the Department of Education under the mayor has failed abysmally to plan for this, to plan for something the administration brought about. In my district in Carroll Gardens in downtown Brooklyn, rezoned, condos going up everywhere. People are calling me and saying, I can't get my child into kindergarten. The schools are full. On the Lower East Side, parents come to me and say, nobody listens at the Department of Education under the mayoral control. No one is listening. They move our children around. They give our school buildings to charter schools. We have nowhere for our children to go. Mr. President, this has got to stop. Why, when we send all this? We appropriated 2 years ago over $11 billion in a school construction program. Why haven't they built the schools? Don't they have demographers? When they call on turning a neighborhood residential 7 and 8 years ago, don't they know they need schools now? They can't wait, Mr. President. Next year, when we revisit mayoral control, I'll have a lot to say about that. This Department of Education has failed our parents, failed our children, and failed our city miserably. Thank you, Mr. President.